Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space. 17.53, Heaven's Hell. We are back.
Yes, we are. And what better way to be back than to just jump straight into it, shall we?
Absolutely.
Hang on, there's a burp coming up. It's not quite there. It's buried, but it's bubbling. Never mind. I'm just going to read. Day 6. Zepan moved. As battle raged atop its grand protective dome, and the Allied forces approached via the city ring, the outer rim of the structure slowly rotated like a bottle cap. 4 great hatches on the outer surface, with a colossal automatic arm unfolding from within each, tipped with strange, drill-like structures. Just like a doctor applying a vaccine, the 4 spikes struck down into the earth and injected their payloads. The effect was immediate. Transmutation. Whatever substance Zephyr Pandershi had cooked up in his lab, it had been specifically designed to the composition of the city ring. Not just its soil and stone, but even the materials that formed its buildings, or rather its rubble. All was to be reborn without distinction. Those making their way toward Zepan saw the sparkling first, a glimmering iridescence on the horizon, growing brighter, inspiring without fail, a single instinctive thought from whoever looked at it. Beautiful. It was only after that thought had passed their minds that the catastrophe began. The ground became crystalline. Great spikes of bright blue crystal erupted out of the earth, the land itself rapidly exploding into new form and structure. Onward and onward, further and further, the chain reaction continued, radiating out from Zepan's dome, a tidal wave of diamonds reshaping the battlefield itself. Screams rang out as the armies fell afoul of the new environment, soldiers impaled by stalactites, vehicles flipped high into the air. As the reaction spread underground, destabilizing all, jagged crevices even began to open and swallow whatever unfortunates had been positioned above them. Within just a few minutes, Zepan was nestled in the middle of a shining, sharpened cradle. Aboard the Alexander, Alexandrius Toll scowled as he watched the battlefield through a command visor, his magnified gaze sweeping over the new crystalline environment. Full-blown terraforming in a matter of minutes. Was there anything this maniac wasn't capable of? "Damn that Pandershi," he muttered. "With the footing so unstable, it'll slow down our land forces a great deal. Paggy-Babby, how are we looking on air support?" Julia Paggy-Babby of the Honest Men turned away from her console, offering a quick salute with a scaled hand before answering. "Not as of yet, sir. The church has only been able to open gaps in the barrier large enough for personnel and land vehicles. Our engineers are lending support, though." Toll nodded to himself, still scowling. The method the church was using to bypass the weakened barrier was essentially by using specialized automatics to pry it open, as if with a massive set of tweezers. Once they secured this first layer of the enemy territory, they could open gaps for all of their forces to come through. But for the time being, it was just a steady stream. Behind his back, he clenched his fist. This was reminding him more of Elysian Fields all the time. He wouldn't have a repeat of that disaster. Not today! Reaching a decision, Toll reached down, pulling his shotgun out of its holster. In his massive hand, the weapon seemed more like a pistol, but it had carried Toll through many a battlefield in his lifetime. What was one more? "Sir?" Paggy-Babby looked at him, eyes wide. "Inform Pax and have him join me at the barrier," Toll said gruffly, already marching towards the door. "I will take the field today." "Woohoo!" Serena cried, a crystal mountain pouring up out of the earth beneath them. "Bruno, what the heck is this?" As she slid down the steep slope of the colossal stalactite, Serena channeled her violet aether through her boots, converting the shards underfoot into daggers that clung to her feet, acting as skates as she descended. Sparks flew into the air as she maneuvered her way down the still-rising mountain, weaving through the countless other spikes that were jutting out of the main mass. Bruno floated by her side as they descended, taking in the eerily beautiful sight of the transformed landscape below. "I don't know," he answered truthfully. "Zepan must have done something. Some bullshit." "Well," Serena let the wind send her tongue flapping against her cheek, "they'll have to do better than this!" She could say that, but the fact remained that this mountain was still ascending into the sky. In fact, from what Bruno could tell, it was rising faster than they were coming down. If they kept going like this, who knew how long they'd be off the battlefield for? Anatrice and the others were already moving behind the scenes. They couldn't afford to waste time here. "Serena," Bruno said suddenly. "Jump!" Serena neither questioned nor hesitated. Without even looking at her twin, she launched herself off the huge crystal, soaring off the side, with an inconceivably long fall below her. She closed her eyes. She spread her arms. She let the daggers crumble at her feet. This, too, was faith. Bruno seized hold of her shoulders with his talons. He had reconstructed his barrier form into a great rock, and flew forth, acting as a glider as the two of them descended upon the ruins at much greater speed.
Okay, Bruno, where we dropping?
He's the glider. Would you equip the Bruno glider in Fortnite?
I would.
Hell yeah. He angled the head of his bird form this way and that as they came down, taking everything in. The scattered soldiers, the shifting ground, everything was still changing. This was a land of chaos. Chaos! First things first, Bruno said. We need to find Ruth, is what I want to say. Serena looked up at him, blinking innocently. Bruno? When Bruno spoke next, his voice was laid over an iron line of tension. The thing is, we're being watched. Something's been following us for a while, and I can tell just from this feeling. He shuddered, an instinct of his old body faced with atrocious killing intent. That it's something awful. Oh wait, you did the voice for this, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Scary. I'm chills. It's like he's right here.
Feel the aura?
JC did not curse Y, and he did not curse Wu Ming. The first would have been unthinkable, and the second he'd save for later. Right now, he was too busy surviving. Corpse construct, flamethrower! JC darted backwards across the surface of the dome, avoiding jets of blue flame again and again, and between each blast he deflected a strike from One Star's blade with his claws. Although the Revenant seemed to have a distaste for the False Knight, their teamwork was serviceable, One Star easily taking advantage of the gaps McCoy left for him. How unfortunate. JC would have preferred discord between his enemies. Corpse construct, beast whistle! Corpse construct, flash grenades! McCoy's next assault was upon JC's senses. A shrill shriek blasted through his ears, and a blinding light burnt at his vision. As far as openings went, none could be more devastating, and so JC entrusted his survival to the instincts that Y had granted him. Friday the 13th, a new beginning! One Star's blade cleaved through the air, easily slicing the beast's form in half, but all that clung to his sword was fur, not blood. A decoy, McCoy said casually. I'm aware, One Star replied, a note of irritation in his voice. His eyes were still closed, always closed, but One Star reacquired his enemy quickly. A new beginning was a transitory form. By discarding its fur, it could create a decoy or other construct, escaping afterwards as a spindly skeletal scavenger. JC, now much smaller, dropped flat against the ground to dodge One Star's next swing, before kicking off of his shield to launch high up into the air. Friday the 13th, Chapter 2! The fur returned, mingled with feathers, as huge black wings sprouted from JC's back. This was the form he had used to infiltrate Oberon, proficient in long-distance flight, although when the need arose it was more than capable of direct combat. Here, in the darkness of Nermut, the need had never been closer to heaven. Pink aether crackled around JC's wings as he whipped them through the air, once, twice, each wing beat sending blasts of air pressure coursing over the roof of the dome. With the third crash, JC released a volley of razor-sharp feathers, aimed with precision at his two opponents. He was under no illusion that these two would fall to feathers, of all things, but it was crucial that he reclaim the momentum here. Nothing can change for the man who but reacts. Honesty, 1699. One Star raised his shield to protect himself, the feathers adhering to the shield's surface and going no deeper. McCoy, for her part, raised her hand to meet the onslaught. Corpse construct, 4 rings! Wu Ming! It seemed that JC could spare a moment to curse the man who'd abandoned him to this mess. Not only had he dropped his back up into a dire situation, he provided the enemy with reference for a new ability before leaving. McCoy's orange aether crackled as she replicated the armament the clown had deployed earlier. 4 rings crawled forth, formed from coiled nerves, floating in the air and slowly orbiting McCoy's body. As the feathers approached, they shifted course, flying wildly in every direction, rather than going anywhere near McCoy. One even flew to the side towards One Star, who had to slash it out of the air to avoid being hit. Where is she getting all these corpses from?
She's saving these up. Well, if you recall, for the entire arc so far about when she fought Ruth, she's been recording cloned corpses.
Oh,
She has plenty.
They're just in her aether. Perhaps some caution, my lady, he ventured. McCoy ignored him. This is a useful armament. I should thank that fool. She tilted her bandaged head up to regard JC. You won't be able to hit me with projectiles ever again. I'd recommend surrender. No. Knowing this man, I'd recommend you retreat or kill yourself. JC had no intention of answering. Instead, he took a moment to consider his options. Immediate victory wasn't necessarily his goal here. Right now, his role was to keep Z-Pan's immediate response occupied until the Allied forces could reach the dome and begin bypassing the second layer of the barrier. The terraforming strategy would slow that down, to be sure, but the principle of the matter remained the same. The longer JC could keep these two fighting him, the better. There was no way that these two would be the only forces Pandershi dispatched against an entire army, but they were still valuable pieces to take off the board. It was a hopeless battle. But then again, that was life, wasn't it? A pilgrimage meant nothing without an intolerable burden. Friday the 13th. JC crashed down onto the roof, wings retreating back into his fur. This was his standard form, built for combat, designed with no greater purpose than to tear sin apart with claw. In some ways it felt more familiar to him than his human form. It would serve, and so would he. McCoy flicked the safety off her revolver. "Looks like you found some measure of resolve," she said with a great distaste. "A pity." JC's victory was measured in the seconds he could snatch away. He rushed forward, One Star rushed forward, McCoy rushed forward, and JC tasted hell. Corpse construct, chainsaw, hand grenades, acid spray, sledgehammer, anti-ship rifle, flamethrower, brazen bull, bullets, and once JC had stolen 300 seconds, corpse construct, coffin cannon. Friday the 13th, Part 3. Only by his assuming his defensive form, built like a tank, was JC able to survive the coup de grace. Even so, he was sent flying, blasted by the scorching beam, and pushed through the battlefield below, his body carving a valley through the crystal sea. He lay crumpled in a crater, the dome distant, McCoy's silhouette atop it barely even visible anymore. Why is it Chapter 2 and Part 3?
Is it Chapter 2?
Pissing. Yeah, you put Chapter 2 and Part 3.
Hold on, it might be a mistake on my side, sorry. I have to check the Friday the 13th movie title.
I'm the original Friday the 13th. Only by a... Sorry,
it should have been Part 2 before.
Shaking my head. With this level of damage, JC could not sustain the transformation. His body deflated from its massive shape back into a human shell. A hollow wheezing filled the air. This was it. His bones were broken, his organs battered. Every attempt at movement was twisted into a violent twitch and shiver. Blood was leaking into many places it had no business being. Blood was leaking into his eyes. But his mind remained his own. His mind was solid ice. As soon as Wu-Ming had departed, JC had expected things would reach this point. This was no longer the sort of situation where he could afford to keep his strength in reserve. He'd already been given permission before coming to this forsaken place. Permission to act as the final church's final sanction once again. Indeed, this was it. As calm as could be, as calm as death itself, JC determined the checklist of directives to a self that would not comprehend the reasons for them. His missions were threefold. He had to breach the dome, he had to breach the barrier, he had to destroy the enemy forces. He had a clear image in his head of what the enemy forces entailed, those of Z-Pan and those of Darkstar. Hopefully that would prevent him from losing his way. As ever, as always, JC, the angel of hostility, had faith. He had the utmost faith in the man Y had chosen to create. "Don't worry," he thought, still gazing at McCoy's distant form through his blood-drenched eyes. "I'll send you to heaven." Friday the 13th, the final chapter. "Aren't you worried?" Hazley asked, looking at M like he was insane. The fashionista was the picture of nonchalance, sitting with his legs crossed in Hotel de Sade's dining room, sipping a cup of tea from a saucer. He looked up at Hazley as she spoke, blinking quizzically. On the table before him, a script was displaying a fuzzy feed from Jay's hopeless battle atop Z-Pan's dome. "What do you mean, sweetie?" he asked innocently. "Your friend." She waved a hand towards the script. Your brother. He's getting his ass kicked out there. He's gonna die. We're seriously just gonna sit here and do nothing?" Again, M blinked. Then he began to laugh. A loud and high-pitched laugh that went on, as if Hazley had just told the funniest joke in the world. When he returned his cup to the saucer, his hand was still trembling. "Ah," he giggled, wiping a tear from his eye. "You're so silly, hey-hey." "Ah." "Hey-hey?" Hazley frowned, but M wasn't done. "I'm not worried about my big brother at all. Obviously." "Ooh," he said, picking up the script and looking down at the dire image fondly. When he spoke next, his voice was soft and gentle. His usual peppiness faded away. "It doesn't matter who he's fighting, or where he is. There's no way he'd die, and there's no way he'd lose. He looked up at Hazley, his eyes full of faith, and for the first time she believed that she was looking at a holy man. After all, he concluded, he's the final church's strongest. A pillar of pink light erupted from the crystal pit, stretching up so high that it collided with the hazy barrier above, the aetheral power stretching out to form a sparkling dome, with a swelling black mass visible deep within. The shape that had been Jacy grew and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. Disaster was the herald. The crystal ruins were blown apart by the sheer rate of growth. The broiling air pressure. I'm imagining like in Akira, when Tetsuo's getting all flesh bubbly. A mere side effect of the transformation was the equivalent to a hurricane, scattering the landscape and flinging it through the air. Even as the swirling trailed away, the return of the shards to the earth was a disaster all by itself. Not that the thing that had been born had reason enough to register that fact. It completed itself. It entered this world. It began to march. A clawed foot stepped forward, its toes dwarfing the ruined skyscrapers all around. Tendrils the size of trains swung in the air, coated in fur and terminating with spikes, sprouting from all over its body. A cloak of wiry darkness brushed against the landscape, sweeping the ground clean of civilization wherever it walked. Its mask alone remained the same size, comically tiny against its gargantuan mass, barely visible as a tiny white dot. It was a mountain of flesh and bone and black fur. It was the ultimate human weapon the final church had access to. Standing at 393 feet, weighing 99,633 tons, the final sanction of the final church looked upon its meal, the city of Zipan. The faintest residue of irritation directed it to its first target, the woman standing atop the dome, the corpse wrapped in bandages. Even from this distance, its awareness of her was perfect. It inspected her with senses beyond 5 or 6 or even 7. If it had possessed the wisdom to think of doing so, it surely could have counted the atoms that made up her body. At any rate, it knew all it needed to know of her within 1.2 seconds. The enemy was made of meat. 16 tendrils squirmed out of the final sanction's back, 10 more joining the 6 that it had already deployed. If it had wanted, it could have deployed 100 more. It had been designed long before birth with the ability to generate extremities as it pleased. 7 would have been enough to accomplish its aim. 16 would suffice to satisfy its rage. The final sanction roared, and with it an electromagnetic pulse of unimaginable force blasted out from its body. Each and every automatic between it and Zipan's dome collapsed immediately. The only exception was the liquid temperance, which hurriedly cobbled the remains into metal puppets to try and hold off the Allied forces with. None of this had been intentional. It was a mere side effect of the final sanction naturally existing. Within the final sanction's body, the sophisticated chemical refinery that was its stomach worked, rapidly devising the perfect compound to achieve the sanction's base desires. This was nothing less than alchemy. The volatile liquid was pumped through countless tubes up through the sanction's tendrils, and the spikes at the end of those tendrils snapped open, suddenly like the beaks of birds, each aimed right for the tiny red dot atop Zipan's dome. It fired. Rays of holy light blasted out from the final sanction's tendrils without end, blasting against Zipan's dome and shrouding half the battlefield in a ceaseless cloak of smog. McCoy had devised her coffin cannon through tireless aetheral mastery and the sacrifice of countless lives. Here and now, the final sanction achieved the same feat with nothing but its own biology. Indeed, each ray of light had heat and force equal to a coffin cannon, and they were rapid fire, striking McCoy's position again and again and again and again. Far below, the crystals were beginning to vaporize, victim to the sheer heat being vented through the final sanction's feet. It paid the phenomenon no notice. It was not the death of its enemy, and was thus irrelevant. After all, those divine senses were as keen as ever. It knew without a shred of doubt that its enemy was not yet dead. Until the eyes of Y had tasted blood, it would not stop its attack. "Corpse construct, Nighthawk!" A sleek, dark shape launched out of the cloud of smog, an air combat vehicle designed for speed and maneuverability, plasma blasters already spinning beneath its wings. Within the cockpit, McCoy worked the controls, setting a path directly towards the colossal enemy. It roared, and the jet went down. McCoy did not despair. As the plane plummeted out of the sky, she simply kicked the cockpit window open and leapt out. "Corpse construct, Halcyon A-93!" before manifesting a new jet around herself. The sequence continued. A roar, a fall, a roar, a fall, a roar, a fall, and a ceaseless approach. McCoy had more than enough corpses in stock to continue this kind of dance for years. She didn't hesitate for even a second as she approached the final sanction, weaving through blasts when she could fly, summoning new chariots when she could not. Perhaps that what she was doing could not be called valor. Perhaps it couldn't even be called foolishness. But the fact remained that McCoy flew towards the beast without hesitation or compromise, and the beast, driven by an angelic rage, came to meet her. The automatics across around half of the battlefield are compromised, Zephyr Pandershi's casual voice came over the communicator, so we'll be deploying you earlier than planned. Yeah, the dragon replied, finger against his ear. Don't worry, buddy. You don't need to explain yourself to me. I'm raring to go. Open these doors and I'll go right now, honest. Perhaps I'll take you up on that, variant. The dragon and the others were positioned in a hangar on the side of Zepan's dome, ready to be deployed. The original plan had been for them to emerge once the Temperance automatics had softened the enemy forces, pressing the advantage, but apparently some big monster had appeared and thrown all the plans off. Well, whatever. It wasn't as if the dragon cared too much. Right now, his mind was fully on the rematch ahead. He dressed for the occasion, a new outfit for the final war, a hefty fur coat open at the chest, a pair of swim shorts, and shades over his eyes. It was a fashion disaster, to be frank, but that was just the way he liked it. It amused him to dress like an idiot, knowing that nobody would dare to say a word. He was a happily nudist emperor. Besides, it wasn't like he couldn't see it.
He could see it. He's blind.
Oh. Sorry. Besides, it wasn't like he could see it. The hangar doors slowly slid open, blue light falling upon the dragon and the unusual troops behind him. They were not human. Anyone looking at them would have been able to tell that in an instant. They were humanoid, to be sure, but humanity was in short supply here. Their bodies were white as chalk, without clothing or anything for clothing to hide, looking like they were formed from melting wax. The only trace of color to them were indistinct red stains that served as their faces, these crimson Rorschach tests, their only markers of identity. Bubbles gently bloomed and popped across their bodies. These were but transitory forms, short-lived defaults that battle would refine. Not one moved, not one made a sound. They were flesh and blood, true, but in their nature they were no different than automatics. For now. The second the hangar doors slid open, the dragon launched himself forth into the fray, but for these flesh dolls a command from their creator was required. Zephyr Pandershi's voice filled the hangar. It was soft but confident, fatherly and motherly in equal measure. Go forth, my enfants! A chorus of nightmarish screeching filled the air, as hell's litter spilled into the world.
Ooh.
They're back, all the way from Arc 8. Are you ready for some Aetheral hashtag questions?
I am.
Alright, let's see what we've got here, shall we? Let's see.
You should check it out, by the way. The previous chapter now has an image, a picture.
I did notice earlier. I saw you mention it. It was pretty cool. Why is Wu Ming all black and white again?
Because he's sad.
Oh. Rurum asks, what is the average Nermut citizen told about Maxim? Does he have the same pomp as One Star?
No, he's very much a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. He stays in Oberon and does his work all the time. So they probably know, probably if you're higher up, you know there's a guy called Maxim that's important, but you wouldn't know that much about him.
Interesting. Rurum asks, did God Trash have any connection to the final church?
He did not. He was basically like he was not very intelligent. And it's questionable whether he knew what was going on at any given time.
Oh. Room also asks...
He was basically, in terms of like how he was as a sous chef, he was basically a kaiju that could shrink down to a humanoid form.
Oh.
So he would just get big and start smashing stuff.
I mean, that seems like a pretty effective strategy. Room also asks, how differently would the meeting with Toll and Jabra Harza had gone if it was Fei Long there instead of tomfoolery?
It would depend on if it's the same circumstances now. It could have either gone much more cordially, or he would just not have compromised at all. Maybe if things had gone especially bad on Serendipity.
MT asks, can Bruno Aether burn, and is it possible to replicate what happened to Bruno with other summon type Delseds?
I could say Bruno cannot Aether burn because there's no physical body to sort of bait it in with.
Yeah.
I would say, in terms of summon, well, in terms of other genres, it's a very unique situation. So I'll say not impossible, but probably not.
Okay. Rockshark asks, could Dragon and Pan have contained the Prince influence had Dragon not crashed out, or were they always doomed to fail?
Maybe we'll find out more.
All right, and I think, hey, maybe we leave it there, huh?
Yeah.
We have plenty of questions for next time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thank you all for watching. Maybe we'll even see you again next time.
Yeah. Bye.